Chapter 3, Software. Computer programs or computer software can be divided into two classifications, system software and application software. System software provides interface and services for users and for other software. It can be divided in turn into operating systems and utility programs. Application software is software designed to provide specific services for users. Operating systems allow the components of a computer to work together. Some examples of operating systems are Unix, Windows, Mac OS, Android, iOS, and Linux. Typically, an operating system's going to include programs interfacing users and hardware, users and software, software and hardware, and software with other software. The operating system will do things like transferring data from memory and disks and rendering output to a display device. The earliest operating systems required users to type their programs and any accompanying commands to the operating system onto punched cards, and then place these cards into a card reader, which would read the cards and copy them into memory. Then the program could be executed. These were inherently single tasking systems that could execute one program at a time and finish it before loading and starting the next program. Now, in this time, processing time was expensive, and peripheral devices were relatively very slow. Whenever a program was running and needed to access one of the peripheral devices, the processor would have to stop executing the program, and the peripheral device would process the data. This, of course, was inefficient because the peripheral devices were slow. Programs would stop, and the peripheral device enters the data, and then the program starts again and runs some more, and the peripheral waits for more peripheral device action, and so on. So there are expensive computers are spending a lot of time sitting idle, waiting for these slow peripheral devices to finish dealing with their data. The first computer that used a multitasking system was the Leo 3 in England, owned by the Lyons and Company. It first started working in 1961. In this kind of a system, they would load several programs into computer memory at once, and then the first program starts to execute. When we came to a point where the program needed a response from a peripheral device, the context of the stored program would be stored away. The peripheral device would start working, and another program could start running. The process then would continue, program, another program, another program, until all the programs were done. A system that allows several users to interact with the computer concurrently is a multi-user system. The users can interact with the system using what was called a monitor. In the early days, the most common kind was an ASR 33 teletype machine. In order to support multi-users, the systems developed a concept of time slicing. The CPU is assigned to execute program commands from one process for a short period of time, one time slice, and then start executing the commands from another process for a time slice, and so on. The idea being that each user has the impression that the computer is continually working for him or her, although in fact it's working for several users, one after another, and then back to the first, and then to the second and the third, and so on. The first successful multi-user time-sharing system was called DTSS, and it was developed at Dartmouth College, Dartmouth Time-Sharing System. It started working, was introduced in May 1st, 1964, and it stayed in operation until the end of 1999. So it was very successful for a long, long time. The implementation started in 1963. The development started in 1963 by a student team directed by Kemeny and Kurtz. The idea was to provide easy access to computing facilities for all members of the college, primarily a liberal arts college, not an engineering college. Kemeny is on record for was stated that he thought that 10 seconds was the maximum time that a user would have to wait for a system response. Now, that might seem like a long, long time today, but at the time, single user systems would typically have to wait overnight, and waiting times of several days for results was not uncommon. So 10 seconds would have seemed to users of the time like miraculous, instantaneous. It was able to support up to 300 simultaneous users during the 1970s. At that time, it was a huge number of simultaneous users. Probably the most widely used multi-user operating system is Unix. It was developed by Thomson and Ritchie at AT&T Bell Labs in 1969. It spread first to academic institutions, and thereafter to vendors, IBM and Microsoft and others, under various proprietary names: Xenix, AIX, Solaris. A personal computer is a computer small enough and cheap enough that is feasible for an individual to own and use. The computer time-sharing models that were used with bigger, more expensive systems, many computers and mainframes, were not really appropriate, at least for the earliest of the personal computers. But they do need some kind of an operating system so that the users can execute programs, store files, use their computers. The earliest of the personal computers used rather primitive command line interfaces. A command line system was more or less inherited from the earlier multi-user systems, adapted from them, systems like DTSS and Unix. A user enters commands from the keyboard, the computer interprets the command and executes it. Then the computer sits and waits for the user to enter another command. Some of these early command line interfaces were Apple-DOS, CP/M, MS-DOS. In the early 1980s, they developed a better means for users to communicate with their computers and control them. A graphical user interface, or GUI, is a kind of interface that lets the users interact with the devices through icons and visual indicators instead of the text-based user interfaces. GUIs were introduced in reaction to the learning curve for that users needed to go through to make good use of their command line interfaces. Alan Kay used a GUI as the primary interface on the Xerox Alto computer that was released in 1973. Most of the modern general purpose graphical user interfaces are derived from the Xerox Alto, although the Alto never really reached commercial production. The first commercially available computer with a graphical user interface was in 1979, the PERC workstation. In 1981, Xerox eventually commercialized the Alto in the form of a new and enhanced system, the Xerox 8010 Information System, or Xerox Star. The early systems by Xerox were widely copied and produced the Apple Lisa in 1983, the Apple Macintosh in 1984, the Atari ST with Digital Research's GEM system, and the Commodore Amiga 1985. Of these early systems, the Apple Macintosh is certainly the most influential. The classic Mac OS is the system that came with the original Apple Macintosh, introduced in 1984, and was the primary operating system on Macintoshes all the way through 2001, over 15 years. The Mac OS is noted as being easy for users, but it was criticized for having limited memory management capacity, lack of memory protection and access controls, and for its propensity for conflicts among extensions. The most popular operating system on personal computers, IBM PCs and compatibles, is Windows, Microsoft Windows. It was in 2014 that Microsoft admitted that they were no longer the operating system on the majority of all personal computing systems, largely because it was overtaken by Android, and Android was used in smartphones, and there's a lot more smartphones than there are PCs. Linux is an open source operating system developed by Linus Torvalds, derived from Unix. Android is a version of Linux, and it's dominant on smartphones, and that's because there are so many smartphones, Linux and Android has the largest installed base of all general purpose operating systems. It's also a major player in operating systems on big systems, mainframe computers. It's used on almost 100% of the top 500 supercomputers. As of 2018, it was on about 2% of desktop computers, and it in the Chrome OS derivative version, it dominates the under $300 notebook sales. Nearly 20% dominates the education market and is huge in the cheap notebook sales. Desktop Linux systems include windowing systems and desktop environments. Two major ones are GNOME and KDE, Conqueror. The smartphone is a mobile phone with an operating system that normally combines features of a personal computer, and other features, additional features that are particularly useful for mobile computers, mobile systems. Systems such as event calendars, media players, video games, GPS navigation, digital cameras, and video cameras. Smartphones can access the internet and can run a variety of third-party software components called apps. And these apps can be usually obtained through places like Google Play and Apple App stores. Smartphone typically has a color display and a graphical user interface, a GUI. The display is almost always a touch screen, and some smartphones also have touch-enabled keyboards. The vast majority of the smartphones use either Android or iOS. Android is a mobile operating system that was developed by Android Inc., but was later purchased by Google in 2005. As was mentioned earlier, it was based on Linux, and it was designed primarily as an operating system for mobile devices using touchscreens. Google expanded the or adapted the Android Android system to include Android TV for TV television sets, Android Auto for cars, and Android Wear for wristwatches, each having its own specialized user interface. As I've mentioned several times, Android has got the largest installed base of any operating system. iOS is another mobile operating system developed by Apple for its hardware. iOS is the operating system that most of the Apple devices use, including iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch. It's the second most popular mobile operating system, second only to Android. Since smart TVs include computing systems, they have to have operating systems. Just like in a personal computer, a TV operating system will be used as a graphical user interface, a GUI, or user interaction. TV operating systems allow the users to browse channels on satellite or cable TV, but also support on-demand video services. The systems also access pictures, music, or video content on connected storage devices. Smart TVs so far don't have a standard operating system or interface. Some of the most widely used smart TV operating systems are Roku TV, Android TV, Fire TV, WebOS, Tizen, SmartCast, and My Home Screen. A utility program helps system administrator analyze, configure, optimize, and maintain the computer. Utility programs include programs for things like virus protection, access control, file system administration, display control, system restore and backup, and system security. A device driver is a computer program that controls a particular kind of a device that might be attached to the computer. Generally, drivers provide interfaces for their devices. They enable the operating system and other computer programs to access the device functions without having to be programmed for the precise details of the specific hardware. That way, the operating system doesn't have to have the details of every possible device that might ever be attached to the computer. When a new device is installed on a computer, of course, then its drivers have to be installed too. The early personal computer users, the installation of a driver could be frustrating and complicated and difficult. But as the mass market computers became more affordable, the personal computers became more common, and an automated system for driver installation and configuration became essential. Early systems for software configuration included the MSX standard, the NU bus, Amiga AutoConfig, and IBM microchannel. The early expansion cards for the IBM PC required configuration by the physical selection of onboard jumper straps or DIP switches. But the ISA bus devices became designed to support software configuration. By 1995, Microsoft Windows included a comprehensive method for enumerating hardware at boot time and allocating resources, a system that was called the plug and play standard. Now there are several completely automated computer interfaces, and none of them require physical device configuration by the user. The only task of the user is to load the software. The devices would be self-configuring. An application is a program or group of programs designed for the end user to use. Application software or end user programs include things like database management programs, word processors, web browsers, spreadsheets. The term application software as general refers to all applications and distinguishes application software from system software. System software is primarily involved in running the computer, not doing things for the user. Some applications were going to come bundled with a computer. Others are probably separately for the user to acquire if they want them. Applications come as proprietary applications, as open source applications, as university projects. Applications that are designed for mobile platforms are called mobile apps. There are lots of different kinds of application software. An application suite or software suite consists of a bunch of applications bundled together. Enterprise software addresses the need for an entire organization's processes and data flows, working across several different departments in a large distributed environment. Educational software is related to content access software, but has content or features adapted for use by educators or students. Media development software generates print and electronic media for others to consume, most often in commercial or educational setting. Product engineering software is used for developing software and software products. Computer-aided design, CAD, computer-aided engineering, CAE, computer language editing, compiling tools, integrated development environments, application programmer interfaces. Entertainment software refers to video games, screensavers, programs for displaying motion pictures, playing recorded music, other forms of computer-supported entertainment. Productivity software is a term that has come to be used to describe a type of software that helps users produce things. It tends to refer to software that helps in the production of business-related things like documents, databases, graphs, worksheets, presentations. Common examples of the office productivity software are word processors, database management systems, graphics software, and spreadsheet. It's also used for just about any type of application that helps people do their jobs more efficiently. It can be used for programs supporting collaboration and communication. The way software gets marketed or distributed can be categorized in several different ways. Some of the classifications that are often used are commercial software, shareware, freeware, public domain, and software as a service. They're not entirely mutually exclusive, and there's some dispute as to exactly how the different terms are defined. Most software gets covered by a copyright that provides legal basis for owners to establish their rights to. The term commercial software refers to software that users pay for. Proprietary software vendors can, and normally do, prohibit users from sharing the software with others. If the others want to use it, they have to get their own license. The software vendors spell out the specific terms for the use in a end user license agreement, EULA. The user may agree to this user license in writing, can do it interactively on the screen, or it's been determined that just opening a box that has the software in it implies that you agree to the terms of use. Vendors or creators are not generally interested in negotiating the terms of the license agreement. It's user take it or leave it. But vendors will sometimes grant rights to the user in the license agreement. Vendors will typically limit the number of computers that the individual software can be used, prohibit the user from installing the software on extra computers unless the user pays for the right to copy it onto multiple computers by buying a site license. So he can use the software on his own computer, more than several of his own computers. There are two distinct types of single user licenses: perpetual and subscription.